Welcome to Biker Business. These are 10 Honda motorcycles from the 1970s that last forever. The 1979 CBX feels like a bike built more for what people wanted than where the motorcycle industry was actually heading. But one look at it and you can't help but stare. That massive engine hangs below the frame, fully exposed with 6 gleaming exhaust pipes sticking out like a mechanical work of art. It almost seems like it shouldn't work, like it's too much, but somehow it does. The CBX was the brainchild of Soichiro Irimajiri, the same guy behind Honda's legendary 6-cylinder race machines, the RC165 and the RC166. But that's where the racing DNA stops. Back in the 60s, Honda's race bikes were all about squeezing out more power, higher revs, and blistering speed. The CBX, not so much. It topped out at 9,000 RPMs, made around 105 horsepower, and carried a hefty 600-pound frame. Honestly, it feels like Honda built the CBX just to show off. It wasn't a game changer like the Goldwing or the Interceptor, but here we are, still talking about it. And that's because people are still rolling with it to this day. The Honda Goldwing isn't just a motorcycle. It's a legend on 2 wheels, and yeah, it's massive, but didn't start out that way. The very first Goldwing, the GL1000, was a much leaner machine and surprisingly easy to handle. At its core is an engineering marvel, a liquid-cooled flat-4 engine that runs very smooth. But Honda didn't stop there. They threw in a genius trick. The generator spun in the opposite direction of the engine to counteract its torque, making the ride even more stable. And instead of a traditional chain drive, Honda went with the drive shaft, delivering an unbelievable smooth experience on the road. They also made sure riders are never left stranded. The GL1000 comes with an electric starter, but just in case, Honda added a backup kickstarter too. Even with its hefty 584-pound dry weight, this machine is a hit. The engine cranks out 80 horsepower and 63 pound-feet of torque, all managed through a 5-speed manual transmission, and riders still can't get enough. Honda sold over 13,000 of them in the US in the first year alone, which is huge for a vintage Honda motorcycle. This classic Honda goes by a few names, the Super 90, S90, or Sport 90, and once you see one, it's hard to forget. Honda cranked out plenty of 90cc bikes, all sharing the same engine, but the S90, it had a different attitude. While the others were built for practicality, this one made to move. Fast. Pop the seat, and you'll find a 90cc air-cooled engine hooked up to a 4-speed manual transmission. Unlike the semi-automatic C90 models, the S90 makes you work for it. You have to use a clutch, giving riders a more hands-on, engaging ride. But here's what really sets it apart. It's insanely light. Instead of a bulky steel tube frame, Honda went with a pressed steel design, making it shockingly nimble. Pair that with narrow handlebars, a slim body, and a punchy little engine, and you've got a bike that feels way faster than it had any right to be. Honda built plenty of sporty versions of their bikes, but the S90 is probably the most famous one, and it's still being seen around today. If you're talking legendary motorcycles, the Honda CB750 has to be on the list, no question. This wasn't just another bike, it was a game changer. The first modern 4-cylinder motorcycle from a major brand that everyday riders could actually afford. But Honda didn't just go bigger, they went smarter. Electric start, blinking turn signals, rock-solid brakes, features that felt almost futuristic at the time. But the real star of the show? The engine. A 736cc 4-cylinder beast cranking out 68 horsepower. Back then, a production bike hitting 125 miles per hour was almost unheard of. And it wasn't just about raw speed. Honda also nailed the design. What really made the CB750 a hit, though, was how easy it was to ride. No weird quirks, no tricky mechanics, just smooth power and a comfortable ride. And, of course, it looks stunning. Many still consider the CB750 one of the greatest motorcycles ever made, and because of that, it's no wonder it hasn't gone out of existence. In 1972, Honda took a bold step into uncharted territory with the XL250. This wasn't just another motorcycle, it was a true trail bike, built from the ground up for off-road adventures. Unlike anything Honda had made before, it wasn't borrowed from older models or repurposed from past designs. It was a risk, but Honda was ready to shake things up. The biggest game changer? The engine. Honda broke new ground by giving the XL250 their first ever 4-valve per-cylinder engine design. But they didn't stop there. It also comes with a unique ignition system, a special carburetor, and a 5-speed gearbox, all cutting-edge choices that push the limits while still keeping that unmistakable Honda feel. Now, was it the most powerful bike on the market? Not even close. But Honda wasn't chasing raw power. Instead, they fine-tuned the engine to be smooth, easy to ride, and surprisingly capable, delivering a solid 22 horsepower. The real magic, though, was in its weight, just 127 kilograms. Honda even used lightweight magnesium alloy covers on the engine to trim every possible gram, coating them in special gold-green paint to fight off rust. Honda never set out to make a full-on dirt bike, but the XL250's popularity proved they had struck gold. It quickly took over from the old CL series, and its success led to the creation of later versions which are still seen around today. Back in the late 1970s, the Honda CX500 made a name for itself as a solid all-around motorcycle. It isn't the fastest thing on two wheels, but it isn't exactly slow either. If you really pushed it, you could probably hit 90, maybe even 100 miles per hour, eventually. Weighing just under 500 pounds, it has a comfortable seat height that suits most riders. And like all Hondas, it was ridiculously well made. Even now, more than 50 years later, these bikes are still surprisingly reliable. That reliability, it mostly comes down to the liquid-cooled engine and shaft drive, which makes maintenance a breeze. And those Comstar wheels, they come with tubeless tires, meaning far less hassle than the old-school wire wheels. One of the coolest things about the CX500 is its versatility. You could turn it into a cafe racer, a scrambler, or even a chopper. Honda even made a touring version called the Silverwing, but honestly, these bikes look best in their original form. The crazy custom work should be saved for bikes that aren't as special as this one. By the mid-1970s, Honda had already mastered the art of building 4-cylinder engines. The CB400F was air-cooled and pretty straightforward, but Honda wasn't going through the motions. They threw in bigger valves, bumped up the compression, and gave it a fresh exhaust system. The result? A lively 37 horsepower and 24 pound-feet of torque. But the real standout feature? The 6-speed gearbox, Honda's first on a bike this size. This extra gear made a huge difference, helping the smaller engine pull better at low speeds while keeping the revs down on the highway. The ride then becomes smoother, easier, and even more fuel efficient. Honda didn't just focus on the engine though, they fine-tuned the handling too. While most Japanese bikes of the era had a more upright riding position, the 400F had lower handlebars and rear-set foot pegs, letting riders lean into corners more confidently. It isn't a full-on race bike, but it definitely feels sportier. At just 392 pounds with a full tank, the 400F is light, slim, and an absolute blast to ride. But it's mostly still seen in the UK, where riders love bikes with great handling and just the right amount of power. The MT125R marked Honda's return to road racing after more than a decade, debuting in 1977 with an update in 1978. It packed an air-cooled 2-stroke engine, but with a little extra bite, 26 horsepower in 77 and 28 in 78. The engine itself has a lot in common with the CR125 motocross bike, though the shifting setup is a bit different. Both use the standard 1-down, 5-up pattern, but Honda flipped the shifter because the MT125R has rear-set foot pegs. To keep things familiar for riders, there's a special linkage installed behind the engine cover. At first, the M125R had its own cylinder separate from the CR125R, but later on, Honda started using the same part numbers for both models, making it easier to find replacements. If parts were hard to come by, some owners just swapped the entire engine with one from the CR125M. The easiest way to tell, if the gear shift is backwards, someone probably made the switch. Right now, these bikes are worth a lot of money, just like most Honda race bikes. The Honda CB500T was part of the legendary CB series, a lineup of bikes that covered just about every engine size. By 1976, the CB500T had arrived, bringing a no-nonsense 498cc engine, dual carburetors, and a 5-speed gearbox. Nothing flashy, just a solid, reliable setup. And of course, it had all the classic touches: wire wheels, a chrome exhaust, wide handlebars, round gauges, and a chrome-ringed headlight. The black frame, comfy seat, and center stand all gave it that unmistakable Honda style. The CB500T's steel frame was paired with a telescopic fork up front, giving about 5 inches of travel, while the dual shocks in the rear provided around 3. Not cutting edge, but enough to handle everyday riding. Under the tank, the air-cooled 498cc parallel twin engine keeps things simple. 2 valves per cylinder and the classic Cayenne carburetors. With 42 horsepower and 22 foot-pounds of torque, it has enough punch to reach 100 miles per hour. Riding it feels smooth thanks to the telescopic forks and adjustable rear shocks. The braking setup is basic, a single disc up front and a drum brake in the back, but it gets the job done. Fully loaded with fluids, it tips the scales at 463 pounds, with a wheelbase of 55.5 inches. This bike is really lightweight and has that classic cafe racer look. It's slim and easy to handle, which is why riders who want something nimble and easy to maneuver still love it and are making use of it today. In the early 70s, motocross wasn't just a sport, it was a revolution. Motorcycles were no longer just for getting from point A to point B. People wanted to ride for fun, push limits, and race. And Honda, they wanted in. They set out to build their own 2-stroke engine, starting with a 250cc design, but instead of going bigger, they went smaller. The result? The 1974 CR125M Elsinore. This little beast packed a 125cc engine with a special piston coating that held onto oil better. And man, can this thing fly. With nearly 17 horsepower, it could hit speeds of up to 60 miles per hour. It isn't just fast, it is smooth too, thanks to that incredible Showa suspension. Honda gave it everything: a tough frame, a 6-speed gearbox, adjustable shocks, plastic fenders, and even more magnesium parts to keep the weight down. Dry, it comes in at just 154 pounds. Fill up the tank, and it is still only 188 pounds. And guess what? Small scramblers are really popular again these days. That makes the Elsinore one of the hottest vintage Honda motorcycles you can find. The 1970s were a golden age for Honda motorcycles, a time when they weren't just making bikes, they were making legends. And each of these bikes proves that great engineering never gets old. Whether you're a collector, a rider, or just someone who appreciates classic motorcycles, these bikes are a testament to how reliable and innovative Japanese motorcycles are.